The Book of Enoch is one of the most mysterious texts in religious history. Written centuries before Christ, it describes events that sound more like mythology than theology. Angels who rebelled against God, giants who terrorized the earth, forbidden knowledge given to humanity, and a final judgment led by a divine figure called the Son of Man. And yet most people have never read it. Why? Because at some point in history, religious authorities decided this book was too dangerous to remain in the Bible. It wasn't declared false. It wasn't burned as heresy. It was quietly set aside. Tonight, we explore 3 questions. What does the Book of Enoch actually say? Why did it terrify religious authorities? And why was it removed from the Bible? This is not speculation, this is history. To understand the book, we must first understand the man. Enoch appears briefly in Genesis chapter 5, verse 24. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. Think about that statement for a moment. Every other patriarch in Genesis follows the same pattern. They lived, they had children, and they died. Adam died at 930 years old. Seth died at 912 years old. Methuselah died at 969 years old, the oldest man in the Bible. But not Enoch. Enoch lived 365 years, a number that corresponds symbolically to the solar calendar. And then God took him, not death. Translation: he was taken alive into heaven. This places Enoch in extraordinary company. In the entire Bible, only 2 people are taken to heaven without dying: Enoch and the prophet Elijah. But unlike Elijah, whose ascension is dramatic and witnessed, Enoch's departure is quiet, mysterious, almost coded. He was no more because God took him. In ancient Jewish tradition, this single verse sparked centuries of speculation. Who was Enoch really? What did he see? What did he know? And why was he so important that God removed him from earth entirely? The rabbis taught that Enoch became something far more than a man. He became Metatron, the heavenly scribe, the angel of the presence, the one who sits beside God's throne and records everything that happens in heaven and on earth. He became a witness to divine secrets, a mediator between God and angels, a prophet who saw not just the future but the hidden past, the events that occurred before the flood, before humanity's corruption, before the world was torn apart by violence and evil. And according to the book bearing his name, Enoch was shown visions. Visions of rebellion in heaven, visions of angels who abandoned their posts, visions of giants who devoured the earth, visions of judgment, fire, and final reckoning. This alone makes the book dangerous. Because if Enoch truly saw what happened before the flood, if he witnessed the rebellion of angels, the corruption of humanity, and the reasons God destroyed the world, then his testimony challenges everything we think we know about Genesis. It fills in the gaps. It names the names. It reveals the mechanics of rebellion. And that kind of knowledge has always terrified religious authorities, because once you know the details, you start asking questions. Questions about power. Questions about control. Questions about what else might have been hidden. The Book of Enoch is not one text. It's a collection of 5 major sections, each with its own focus and theology. First, the Book of the Watchers. This section describes the fall of the angels, their descent to earth, their intermarriage with human women, and the birth of the Nephilim, the giants who would bring violence and corruption to the world. It names the leaders of the rebellion, Semyaza, Azazel, Armaros, and others. It details the forbidden knowledge they taught humanity. And it describes Enoch's role as the messenger of their doom. Second, the Book of Parables. Also called the Similitudes of Enoch, this section contains 3 parables or visions about the coming judgment. It introduces the figure of the Son of Man, a pre-existent divine being who will judge the wicked and vindicate the righteous. This section is the most controversial because its messianic language predates Christianity by centuries. Third, the Astronomical Book. This is the oldest section of Enoch, and it details the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. But it's not just astronomy, it's theology. Enoch describes the cosmic order, the calendar of heaven, and the way time itself is structured by divine decree. The message is clear: the universe operates on God's schedule, not humanity's. Fourth, the Book of Dream Visions. This section contains 2 major dreams: the vision of the flood, the apocalypse of weeks. The first dream retells the story of Noah from Enoch's perspective. The second dream presents all of human history as a series of weeks, culminating in a final judgment and the restoration of righteousness. Fifth, the Epistle of Enoch. This is Enoch's letter to future generations, warning them about the coming judgment and exhorting them to live righteously. It contains dire warnings about the fate of sinners and the ultimate triumph of the righteous. Scholars believe these sections were written between 300 BCE and 100 BCE during the Second Temple period of Judaism. Long before Christianity, long before the New Testament was written. And yet early Christians revered the Book of Enoch. It was quoted directly in the New Testament, specifically in the Book of Jude, verses 14 and 15, which cite Enoch's prophecy about the Lord coming with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment. It was referenced by church fathers like Tertullian, Origen, and Clement of Alexandria. It was considered authoritative by many early Christian communities, particularly in the East. But the Book of Enoch presents a version of history very different from the sanitized, simplified narrative found in Genesis. It presents a world where angels have physical bodies and can reproduce, where forbidden knowledge is real and dangerous, where the supernatural and the natural are not separate realms but interconnected, overlapping, and constantly in conflict. It presents a cosmology where the lines between heaven and earth are dangerously blurred, and that made it a problem. Because the more details you provide, the more questions people ask. The more you explain the mechanics of heaven, the less room there is for institutional control over doctrine. And so over time, the Book of Enoch became inconvenient. Not heretical, just inconvenient. This is where everything changes. This is where the Book of Enoch moves from mysterious to shocking. In the Book of the Watchers, Enoch describes 200 angels who made a pact on Mount Hermon. They were called the Watchers, divine beings sent to observe humanity, to guard and guide without interfering. But they did more than watch. They desired, and they descended. According to Enoch, the leader of the rebellion was an angel named Semyaza. He said to the others, "I fear you will not agree to this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." The other angels replied, Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan but to do this thing. So they swore. They bound themselves with curses, and they descended to earth at Mount Hermon, a mountain whose name literally means the forbidden place. What did they do? According to Enoch chapter 6, verse 2, they took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them. This is not symbolic, this is not metaphorical. Enoch describes physical, sexual union between angels and human women, and the result of these unions was catastrophic. The women gave birth to giants, beings called the Nephilim. Enoch describes them as enormous, violent, and insatiable. They consumed all the resources of humanity. They devoured animals, then people. They shed blood without restraint. They corrupted the earth with violence. But the corruption wasn't just physical, it was intellectual. Because the Watchers didn't just marry human women, they taught humanity forbidden knowledge. Azazel, one of the leaders, taught men how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the technology of war. He taught women the art of cosmetics, jewelry, and adornment, how to beautify themselves, but also how to deceive. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cutting, sorcery, and the manipulation of plants for magical purposes. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments, counter magic. Barakel taught astrology, how to read the stars not for worship but for power and prediction. Kokabiel taught the constellations and their movements. Ezekiel taught knowledge of the clouds, how to manipulate weather. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth, geomancy and divination. Shamziel taught the signs of the sun, solar magic. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar cycles and their influence. These weren't gifts. They were violations because according to Enoch, humanity was not meant to know these things, not yet, perhaps not ever. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, power without moral restraint is catastrophic, and the Watchers gave humanity both. The result? Enoch chapter 8 verse 2 says, "And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways." The earth became a place of chaos, violence, and corruption. Giants ruled, humans suffered, blood flowed, and God saw it all. But God's response was not immediate. First, he sent Enoch. Enoch becomes the divine messenger, the one who carries God's judgment to the fallen angels. In Enoch chapter 12, the angel Uriel tells Enoch, "Go to the Watchers of heaven who have sent you to intercede for them. You should intercede for men, not men for you. Why have you left the high, holy, and eternal heaven and lain with women and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men and taken wives for yourselves and done like the children of earth and begotten giants as sons?" Enoch delivers the message. The Watchers are terrified. They beg Enoch to write a petition on their behalf, a plea for mercy. Enoch does. But when he presents it to God, the answer is clear: no mercy. The Watchers will be bound in darkness until the day of judgment. Their children, the Nephilim, will be destroyed, and the earth will be cleansed. This reframes the entire narrative of the flood. In Genesis, the flood is presented as punishment for human wickedness. But in Enoch, the flood is a cosmic cleanup operation. A purging not just of human sin, but of angelic corruption. The giants must die, the Watchers must be imprisoned, and the forbidden knowledge they spread must be washed away. The flood is not just judgment, it's restoration, a reset of creation itself. Now we come to the most controversial part of the Book of Enoch, the part that made theologians nervous, the part that raised questions the church couldn't easily answer. In the Book of Parables, the second major section of Enoch, the prophet describes a vision of the heavenly throne room. This is not unusual. Prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel describe similar visions. But what Enoch sees is different. He sees God, the Ancient of Days, seated on a throne of glory. But beside him sits another figure, a figure called the Son of Man. Listen carefully to how Enoch describes this figure in chapter 46. I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool. And with him was another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness like one of the holy angels. Enoch asks the angel accompanying him, "Who is this? And from where does he come? And why does he go with the head of days?" The angel answers, "This is the Son of Man who has righteousness, with whom dwells righteousness, and who reveals all the treasures of that which is hidden, because the Lord of spirits has chosen him, and whose lot has the preeminence before the Lord of spirits in uprightness forever." Think about what this means. This Son of Man is pre-existent. He existed before creation, chosen, selected by God for a specific purpose. Righteous, the embodiment of righteousness itself. Glorious, seated beside God in the heavenly throne room. Hidden, concealed until the appointed time of revelation. And most importantly, he is the judge. Enoch chapter 69 verse 27 says, "And he sat on the throne of his glory, and the sum of judgment was given unto the Son of Man, and he caused the sinners to pass away and be destroyed from off the face of the earth." This is not a prophet. This is not an angel. This is a divine figure with the authority to judge humanity. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable for later Christian theologians. This language appears in Enoch around 100 BCE, more than a century before Jesus was born. And yet, when Jesus walks the earth, he consistently refers to himself using the same title, the Son of Man. In the Gospels, Jesus uses this title over 80 times. He says in Matthew 26:64, "In the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." This is almost identical to the imagery in Enoch. In Mark 14:62, Jesus says, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Again, throne imagery, divine authority, coming judgment. The parallels are undeniable. So the question becomes, was Jesus referencing the Book of Enoch? Did he deliberately adopt Enochian language to communicate his identity? Or is the Book of Enoch describing a messianic figure that predates and perhaps predicts Jesus? Either way, this creates a problem for the early church. If the Book of Enoch already described a divine Messiah centuries before Christ, a pre-existent Son of Man who sits beside God and judges the world, then the uniqueness of Christian revelation becomes complicated. Not theologically, Christians could still argue that Jesus is the fulfillment of Enochian prophecy. But historically and institutionally, it's messy. Because if ordinary people could read Enoch and see that the Son of Man was already described in detail centuries before Jesus, they might start asking, what else did the early Jews know? How much of Christianity is revelation and how much is continuation? And if Enoch knew all this without being part of the church, what does that say about the necessity of ecclesiastical authority? These are dangerous questions, not because they undermine faith, but because they undermine control. And so, over time, the Book of Enoch became a problem. Not a heresy, just a complication, and complications are removed. So why was the Book of Enoch removed from the Bible? The answer is not simple. It wasn't removed all at once. It wasn't banned by a single council. It faded gradually, over centuries, as the church became more institutionalized and more concerned with doctrinal uniformity. Let's trace the timeline. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, the Book of Enoch was widely respected. It was quoted in the New Testament, specifically in Jude 14-15, where Jude cites Enoch's prophecy about the Lord coming with 10,000 of his holy ones. It was referenced by early church fathers. Tertullian, writing around 200 AD, defended Enoch as scripture. He argued that because it was quoted by an apostle, Jude, it must be considered authoritative. Clement of Alexandria also referenced Enoch positively. Origen mentioned it, though with some caution. But by the 3rd and 4th centuries, doubts began to surface. Why? First reason, angels with bodies challenged emerging theology. As Christian theology developed, the nature of angels became a point of debate. The dominant view, shaped by Greek philosophy, was that angels are purely spiritual beings, incorporeal, immaterial, without physical form. But the Book of Enoch describes angels who have physical bodies, who eat, who marry, who reproduce. This created a theological problem. If angels can take physical form and have children, where is the line between spirit and flesh? If angels can fall so dramatically, does that mean they have free will equal to humans? And if they have free will, what does that mean for the hierarchy of creation? The church preferred a cleaner cosmology. God is spirit, angels are spirit, humans are flesh. Enoch blurred these lines. Second reason, too much supernatural detail. The Book of Enoch doesn't just hint at the supernatural, it catalogs it. It names the fallen angels: Semyaza, Azazel, Armaros, Barakel, Kokabiel, Ezekiel, Arakiel, Shamziel, Sariel. It describes the structure of heaven, the celestial palaces, the movements of stars, the mechanics of judgment. It explains how angels fell, why they fell, what they taught, and what their punishment will be. Church authorities preferred mystery. Mystery creates reverence. Mystery requires faith. But detailed knowledge invites questions, and questions invite independent interpretation. Third reason, it conflicted with church hierarchy. The Book of Enoch presents revelation as direct and experiential. Enoch doesn't go through a priest. He doesn't consult a council. He doesn't need institutional mediation. He walks with God, and God shows him the truth. This is a dangerous model in a hierarchical church. Because if people believe they can have direct access to divine knowledge, through visions, through personal experience, through mystical encounters, then the role of the church as gatekeeper diminishes. The church wanted to control access to divine truth. Enoch suggested you could bypass the institution entirely. Fourth reason, fear of independent interpretation. If people could read Enoch and form their own conclusions about angels, judgment, the Messiah, and the nature of good and evil, the church's authority to define doctrine was weakened. The Book of Enoch is not written for scholars. It's written as a prophetic, apocalyptic text meant to be read and understood by ordinary people. That's empowering. And empowerment is threatening to institutional control. Fifth reason, loss of Hebrew and Aramaic originals. As Christianity spread into the Greek and Latin-speaking world, the original Hebrew and Aramaic texts of Enoch were no longer widely copied. Without manuscripts, the book simply faded from circulation in the West. By the time Jerome compiled the Latin Vulgate in the late 4th century, Enoch was already rare. Jerome didn't include it. And once the Vulgate became the standard Bible for the Western Church, Enoch's exclusion became permanent. The Book of Enoch was not condemned as heresy. It was not burned. It was not banned. It was simply set aside, quietly, gradually. Not because it was false, but because it was inconvenient. But here's the remarkable part of the story. The Book of Enoch was not completely lost. It survived, in one place against all odds: the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. While the Western Church gradually abandoned Enoch, the Ethiopian Church held on to it. To this day, the Book of Enoch is fully canonical in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. It is not considered apocryphal. It is not debated. It is scripture, equal in authority to Genesis, Psalms, and the Gospels. The Ethiopian Church preserved Enoch in the ancient Ge'ez language, a Semitic language related to Hebrew and Arabic. For over 1,000 years, Ethiopian monks copied and recopied the text. They studied it. They preached from it. They integrated its theology into their liturgy and tradition. When European scholars first encountered the Ethiopian Bible in the 17th and 18th centuries, they were astonished. Here was a book that had vanished from the West, a book known only through fragments and references, suddenly appearing in full, preserved by a church on the other side of the world. The first complete Ge'ez manuscript of Enoch was brought to Europe in 1773 by the Scottish explorer James Bruce. He had traveled to Ethiopia in search of the source of the Nile. What he found instead was the Book of Enoch. European scholars were skeptical. Was this authentic? Or was it a medieval composition falsely attributed to the ancient prophet? The debate raged for over a century, until 1947. In that year, Bedouin shepherds discovered a cave near the Dead Sea. Inside were jars containing ancient scrolls, manuscripts hidden for nearly 2,000 years. Among them were fragments of the Book of Enoch, written in Aramaic, carbon dated to the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. This was proof. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval forgery. It was not an Ethiopian invention. It was an ancient Jewish text, written centuries before Christ, read by the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls quoted by the New Testament, and somehow preserved intact in Ethiopia while the rest of the world forgot it. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls vindicated the Ethiopian Church. They had been right all along. The book was never fake. It was forgotten on purpose. Or more accurately, it was forgotten everywhere except in one corner of the Christian world that refused to let it go. Today you can read the Book of Enoch. Multiple translations exist, from Ge'ez, from Aramaic fragments, from Greek fragments. Scholars study it, theologians debate it, and ordinary people read it, wondering the same thing. If this book was good enough for the apostles, if it was quoted in the New Testament, if it was revered by early Christians, why isn't it in my Bible? The answer, as we've seen, has nothing to do with truth or authenticity. It has everything to do with control, convenience, and institutional priorities. The Book of Enoch didn't fit the narrative the church wanted to tell, so it was quietly set aside, but it never disappeared. And now, 2,000 years later, it's back. So why does the Book of Enoch still matter today? Why should we care about an ancient text that was removed from the Bible centuries ago? Because it forces us to confront difficult ideas. Ideas about power and responsibility, about knowledge and restraint, about authority and suppression, about history written by winners. The Book of Enoch presents a world far more complex than the simplified version we often hear. It presents a world where angels can fall not because they are evil by nature, but because they made choices. Knowledge can corrupt, not because learning is bad, but because power without wisdom is dangerous. Giants once walked the earth, not as myth, but as the consequences of cosmic rebellion. And God intervened, not with a sermon, not with a warning, but with a flood that reset creation itself. This is not comfortable theology. It doesn't fit neatly into systematic doctrine. It raises more questions than it answers. But that's precisely why it matters. Because faith that cannot withstand questions is not faith, it's conformity. And truth that must be protected from inquiry is not truth, it's dogma. The Book of Enoch reminds us that Scripture is not just what was included, but also what was excluded. And sometimes the excluded texts are excluded not because they're false, but because they're too revealing. They reveal too much about the supernatural. They reveal too much about the mechanics of rebellion and judgment. They reveal too much about the messianic hope that predated Christianity. And most dangerously, they reveal that ordinary people like Enoch can have direct access to divine truth without institutional mediation. That idea, more than any doctrine about angels or giants, is what made the Book of Enoch dangerous. Because once people believe they can encounter God directly, the power of religious institutions diminishes, and institutions by nature resist their own diminishment. The Book of Enoch was not erased, it was silenced. But silence does not mean absence. The book still exists, the questions still remain. The theology still challenges us, and the truth, whatever it is, cannot be hidden forever. In an age where information is more accessible than ever before, where ancient texts can be read by anyone with an internet connection, where scholarship is democratized and knowledge is no longer controlled by gatekeepers, the Book of Enoch is experiencing a renaissance. People are reading it, asking questions about it, wondering why they were never told about it. And that's exactly what should happen, because the best response to a hidden book is not to keep it hidden, but to read it, study it, debate it, and decide for yourself what it means. So here's the final question. What else was removed from the Bible? Not because it was wrong, not because it was heretical, but because it was too dangerous to leave in. The Book of Enoch is just the beginning. There are other texts, other voices, other perspectives that were suppressed, marginalized, or forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we listen to them. Not to undermine faith, but to deepen it. Not to destroy tradition, but to understand it. Not to reject the Bible, but to see it in its full, complicated, messy, beautiful context. The Book of Enoch was silenced, but it was never destroyed. And now, it speaks again.